What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And this should be a little bit of a shorter video because this is mainly just a little bit of an update video for the Detroit Lions, specifically with some of their roster moves, also a contract update, and we got to hear from Holmes / Ray Agnew and a few of the new additions, Nate Sudfeld, Benito Jones, and Hefe. It's been a minute since we got to hear from Hefe. So in this video, we're kind of just going to update those things as we are now just over a week away from the Lions kicking off the 2022 season officially. Next week, expect to see the prediction videos, the game-by-game stuff, all that stuff next week. But for now, just a little bit of an update. So let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with another Lions latest video. It's crazy, man. We are now 8 days away, is the day I'm recording this, 8 days away from the Lions season kicking off this year. The preseason absolutely flew by. Once we got to the first game, it just kind of flew by after that, which I guess is how the regular season goes too, because you're kind of just always looking towards the next game. Like as soon as the game's over, you're like, all right, who's next? It's just kind of like that, win or lose. Wins, I feel like, take a little bit longer because you kind of just sit there and enjoy, hey, we got the dub. But when you lose, it's like, all right, dude, let's just get to the next week. So I guess this is how the season goes as well. But the preseason flew by. We're right here. The season kicks off Sunday against the Eagles. And I just wanted to update a few of the latest Lions roster moves, just to kind of keep everybody up to date with what's going on as of right now. And then, as I said, next week we'll get into predictions. If we continue to get roster updates, we'll hit on those as well. But it's time. It's go time. So let's start there. Let's start with the Lions practice squad, because in our last video, we took a look at the Lions' 13 players they currently had on their practice squad, and it has since changed a little bit. Now, in that video, remember, we talked about Jermar Jefferson being waived off the Lions roster, which meant that he would have to go through the waiver wire if the Lions wanted to have a shot of bringing him back. Well, since he went through the waiver wire and he was not claimed, the Lions had an opportunity to bring him back. Now, the Detroit Lions did not place a player, say, for example, Levi, on IR to open up a roster spot. Instead, they just signed Jermar Jefferson to the practice squad. Now, remember, they ended up waiving him to open up the spot for Benito Jones, who we're going to talk about in a second, another interior defensive lineman for the Lions. So it's kind of weird to me, but it makes me feel pretty good that maybe the Lions don't feel like Levi's that far out, where they want to make sure that at least he can get to practicing potentially before the first 4 weeks of the season are over. We don't really know with a lot of those guys where they're at. We know the Lions felt like they needed another interior defensive lineman, which I think has to do a little bit with Levi, but they didn't place any of those guys on IR as of now, so hopefully that's a little bit of good news. I think that it could be. So that means the Detroit Lions practice squad currently looks like this, as well as Aldrick Rosas is back with the Detroit Lions, and he is on the practice squad. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he was with the Lions for a very short amount of time, specifically during the season, but then he was also here a little bit for the offseason, as he was kind of in the kicker battle for the Lions. He was signed to a futures contract, but the battle really, as we know, came down between Austin Seibert and Riley Patterson. It really didn't last that long throughout that battle, but last year for the Lions, he did kick one field goal, and he actually made it from 44 yards out. After that, we just pretty much stopped seeing him. It was coming off the loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where we could not make a field goal. So we went out and got a couple of guys for competition, Aldrick Rosas, Riley Patterson, and we saw Rosas the first time around, and it looked good. But then after that, it was just Riley Patterson the rest of the way, and it was like, what happened there with Rosas? Well, he didn't do anything bad on the field that we got to see, but Riley Patterson took over after that, and actually Riley Patterson right now is currently with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He signed with the Jaguars on their practice squad. But the Detroit Lions kept Austin Seibert. Riley Patterson is now with the Jaguars, so as a practice squad spot, it would have been nice to have Riley Patterson back, but the Detroit Lions go with a guy that they were familiar with from a little bit of the offseason and also last season. He also spent time with the New Orleans Saints after he was with the Lions last year. Didn't go very well with the Saints. He was actually only 1 for 4 on the season. Now, the field goal attempts that he had were not the easiest, okay? 2 of his misses, one was 58, one was 52 yards, but there was clearly like a little bit of lack of confidence. Not even confidence, maybe just some trust, because they weren't knocking them through, where Sean Payton actually made decisions at times not to take the field goal when they had an opportunity to do so. Regardless, he is now in our practice squad, and he will add some depth because if you guys remember last year, I mean, that was kind of a thing. Like, teams were trying to little scramble a little bit for some kickers, but also maybe a little bit more competition just from day to day, so it's not just Dawson Seibert. But that's actually what happened last year, is Dawson Seibert got hurt. Either way, Lions currently have 15 players on their practice squad, which means they do have an opening spot. Again, this is subject to change. Even according to Brad Holmes, he said, hey, look, even the guys that made the 53, they still got to work, because there's still not a lock like, hey, you can't be moved because you made the 53. Clearly, that's not true. Okay, we already saw that. It's not true. The Lions do have that one open practice squad spot as of now, which, to me, just looking at the players that are currently on our practice squad, it would make a ton of sense that the Lions, if they're going to add a specific position, it would probably be quarterback. Now, I guess they could technically, I guess, do it with Tim Boyle, because I don't think Tim Boyle signed anywhere. I could be wrong on that, but I've looked. I don't think Tim Boyle's actually signed anywhere. So I guess technically they could do that with Boyle. I don't think that would happen. David Blau, if you didn't know, at least as of this video, as of I'm recording it, he signed with the Minnesota Vikings practice squad, so it won't be David Blau. So I'm assuming this could be one of those young players. Now, that player may not be out there right now. I mean, the Lions, Brad Holmes did say that this is going to be kind of an extended weekend for them, and then they'll get to kind of Philadelphia mode. They'll be into season mode, and that may be when we see like the first addition to this practice squad, potentially of a newcomer. And it could definitely be the quarterback position, because the Lions don't have a quarterback on their practice squad. They only have 2 on the active roster, with Nate Sudfeld as the backup. And when you look at the guys available, when I went through it initially and started watching some of those players, I was looking for a backup quarterback, and I didn't really see a lot of guys that I was like, yeah, I feel pretty good about that. However, now that you have one, and I feel pretty good about Nate Sudfeld, the practice squad quarterback could definitely be just a developmental player. Think Steven Montez last season. Lions could go that direction for sure. They may look for someone with a little more experience to make sure that, you know, there's more competition, I guess, on Nate Sudfeld, more guaranteed competition. But really, when you just look at the names out there, there's not a lot of great names that stand out to you. There are a couple of young guys that have caught my eye a little bit. Chase Garbers, who's played a little bit this preseason. He is from Cal. Okay, I didn't love him coming out of college, but, you know, there's some things stylistically that I think could make sense there. Dustin Crum from Kent State, and also my boy Carson Strong. By the way, speaking of that, open football cards for like the first time in a long time. Come on, man. Ooh, focus. Y'all see that? Hey, what? So is this a sign? Is this a sign? I also ended up pulling Corey Sutton. If you guys remember, he actually retired. And you know what I'm saying? That man ain't nothing. Y'all see that? I was so hyped. But anyways, that's completely besides. Why are we doing this? Anyways, so one more little note to hit on before we go into some of these presser notes. The Detroit Lions also announced today, as of the day I'm recording it, which is a Saturday, that the Lions have restructured a contract of Taylor Decker. Now, when you look at the Lions' financial situations, when you look at their salary cap situation, it looked like the Lions were actually technically over the limit, which can happen for a multitude of reasons, but the Lions had to clear up some cap space. So here's how they did it. They went and restructured Taylor Decker's contract. They didn't restructure a ton of money. According to Over the Cap, the Lions are looking at just over $2 million in cap space, maybe closer to $3 million. Lions don't have a ton of money to spend right now, but this is more so because they had to get under the cap, and you want a little bit of cap flexibility as you go through the year. So they took $6 million of Taylor Decker's base salary, and they made that guaranteed. And as we know, when we've talked about this, when you restructure a contract, that spreads out to the remaining years on his deal. So for him, 4 years spreads out 1.5 each year. So the Lions, all in all, clear up $4.5 million in cap space, roughly. Okay, I don't know if that's the exact number. That's the number that we've been given. So the Lions clear out $4.5 million in cap space, kind of, you know, loosen stuff up a little bit there. And Taylor Decker is probably a guy that just makes sense to do it with, because he's really not going anywhere. Now, it definitely does put more like guarantees on this season, whereas if you try to cut him now, yeah, his dead cap is shot up even more. It's like $22 million. So that's 22 guaranteed. But he's not going anywhere. Your left tackle's not going anywhere. So this is a player that they have flexibility to do it with. He's also probably a long-term beast here, so why not? It's not like they restructured a ton of money. They just did a little bit, and they did it with Taylor Decker to clear up a little bit of space. So I wouldn't expect like any monster move to come out of this. Maybe something does, but I wouldn't expect it. However, the Lions had to clear up some space. So those are the kind of roster moves. Now, with that being said, I do want to dive into some of these takeaways that I have from the presser, specifically from Brad Holmes and Ray Agnew. I thought they gave us some good insight. We haven't heard from them in a very long time, really since the draft. Also, a couple of the notes from our 2 new additions, Benito Jones, Nate Sudfeld, and Hefe. Starting off with Nate Sudfeld, who, if you didn't know, check out the last video, he is now our new backup quarterback as of now, and Brad Holmes seems pretty confident that he's going to handle it. He's going to be, you know, we'll get to that. He's going to be what they think he can be as a backup quarterback. Hadn't been with the Lions for too long when he was doing this presser, so just keep that in mind. But he did say there was a lot of similar concepts a lot of carryover from where he was in the past. There are some new things. There's new verbiage, of course, and he said he actually liked how much control they were giving the quarterback at the line of scrimmage to make checks at the line of scrimmage, things like that. He pointed out the confidence it seems like they have in the short time that he's been there in Jared Goff specifically, because, you know, that's the backup quarterback's role. Not only to be ready, but also support the starting quarterback in any way that they can. He did point out that there is a connection with Deuce Staley. Dang, I don't know how I missed it. I did, you know, I thought Philly, and I was like, no, there's no connection there. And I just moved on. Deuce Staley, should have known it, right? He was the running back coach with the Philadelphia Eagles from 2011 to 2020. Nate Sudfeld was with the Philadelphia Eagles from 2017 to 2020. He was not drafted there, but he was there, which is actually the same year that Deuce Staley left the Philadelphia Eagles because he came to the Detroit Lions. So there is a little bit of crossover between those two. And speaking of his cut a little bit, really didn't go too far into it, which I think makes sense. He did say he wasn't necessarily explained about the cut and why the cut maybe happened, but he did say it was kind of a numbers thing. Also talked a little bit about his connection he actually has with Jared Goff in the past, which isn't a big one, but he knows Jared Goff. He said, one, we came out the same year. Both came out in 2016. He also said they had the same agent. At one point, had the same quarterback coach in high school together at the combine, because, again, they came out in the same year, and they spent time in the past in the offseason together. I don't know if he was talking specifically about this one. I don't think he was, but just in the past, they have spent time together in the offseason throwing and things like that. So there is a little bit of a connection with Jared Goff. On to Benito Jones, who is our new interior defensive lineman. We also talked about him in our last video. He said that he felt like he put out some good tape this preseason. I actually thought last preseason he put out some good tape, which is probably why he was partially on the active roster as well. But yeah, this year, I mean, kind of more of the same. He actually said, and again, we're so early into this scheme and things like that for these new guys in terms of maybe how much they've already picked up. But he did say he kind of liked the attacking style, and he feels like that it fits him, which I think it does well measurables wise. I think it makes more sense for him to be in a little bit more of an attacking defense, but he specifically brought that up. He did play a lot of face up or head up nose tackle position in the past, so it sounds like he'll be playing a little bit more shade with the Detroit Lions, which again, I think does make sense. Remember, this is in addition to potentially allow guys like Aleem to kick out a little bit wide, because a guy like this can hold down the nose tackle position alongside Isaiah Bugg. When he was asked kind of what he brings to the table, he brought up specifically stopping the run and playing physical. Now, hey, don't play yourself. You got some pressure in there. Okay, clearly that's not like his main thing, but he got a little bit of pressure in there. Again, we hit on that in the last video, and he said his first impression of the Lions was the 40 up downs, which, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that would be the first impression. They said, hey, this is what we do around here. We do 40 up downs. Even though Nate Sudfeld said he didn't do them. Okay, he probably should not have said that, because now he probably hit him as soon as they heard that. Like, hold up, this dude didn't do him. Definitely want to dive into some of these notes that we got from Brad Holmes / Ray Agnew, who is the assistant general manager. The general manager, of course, is Brad Holmes. As they talked a little bit about their roster and some of the more recent news, specifically with the Detroit Lions. Let's just start there with the quarterback position. It's kind of the elephant in the room, the quarterback position, and what they decided to do there. And basically the way that he kind of said it is kind of maybe what we talked about a little bit here, as well as the jump that maybe they expected that those guys would take heading into this season, they didn't necessarily take. Last year, they were encouraged by some of the things that they saw in that small sample size for Tim Boyle, and I was encouraged a little bit as well. Yeah, there were some issues there, but there were things that was like, oh yeah, he's really improving, especially when you look to like the jump from the Atlanta game versus the Cleveland Browns game. Now, totally different environment, different team, all of those types of things, but there was improvement within his game specifically. However, remember, he also didn't practice a ton going into those games. Remember, he missed a lot of time. So I'm sure the Lions felt like, hey, there's a little bit of something here. We're going to bring the guy back. And they also decided to bring back David Blau. He brought up his experience and things like that. They decided to bring him back, but he said, as we've kind of talked about, that those guys didn't necessarily take the jump that maybe they would have hoped that they would take. And because of that, it kind of changed plans a little bit, and they had to go searching. And we heard that the Lions may have been willing to trade for a backup quarterback. Luckily, they didn't have to do that, and they were still able to land a guy that looks like they were interested in, which is Nate Sudfeld. And he seemed pretty confident that this was going to work out. I actually think David Blau took a little bit of a jump this offseason, but it wasn't enough to say that, yeah, he probably had earned the backup quarterback position. Tim Boyle specifically didn't necessarily seem to take kind of that jump, and there was just a really big-time lack of consistency there, but we saw it all, so I won't go back into that too much. With that being said, he also talked about maybe some of the positions that they were a little bit concerned about heading into sort of what they've seen so far, and a little bit surprised. Brad Holmes brought up the secondary. He felt like the secondary was the spot that was specifically the safety position, of course, after last season ended, was very light. And it was for a while there. Before the Lions signed Deshaun Elliott, and then because we also hadn't had the draft yet at that point, it was like, well, the Lions obviously have to get a safety. I mean, they hadn't got anybody at that point. It was a while before they picked anybody up. They did claim Juju Hughes, which, of course, he made the 53-man roster over C.J. Moore, of course, dealing with the injury. But he made the 53-man roster. He brought up that move specifically, and that was kind of an under-the-radar move that happened like immediately after the season. That, of course, because of the timing, no one's going to be talking about Juju Hughes. I mean, the season's over. Why would I talk about that? However, heading into this year, of course, they signed Deshaun Elliott. Then they hit Kirby Joseph in the draft, and he felt like the secondary as a whole stepped up. The Juju Hughes claim was big time, he feels like, and I think that's because, they kind of know what they're getting out of Juju Hughes. Ray Agnew hit it. The guy has some limitations, but basically he's a guy that can make some plays, and he has made some plays for sure, and he's been pretty efficient throughout the preseason. Some spots give him issues, but he's been a little bit reliable, which has been nice because you have a lot of young players. But again, Kirby Joseph, of course, if he moving to that position, there was a lot of question marks. It was pretty bare for the most part, and then they started getting some additions. And he also brought up, of course, Jeff Okudah, who he said, we were honest with him, we were straight with him. Now, I'm not sure what they necessarily told him, but it was probably, kind of what we're thinking as well. Like, hey, look, man, we know you haven't been able to be out there because of injuries. It's unfortunate, but we really need you to show us something this year for sure. Been impressed because Jeff Okudah has accepted the challenge, and of course, he's looked pretty darn good. But as we know, he's going to have his issues, he's going to have his lumps, he's going to have his struggles, just like every cornerback does, every great cornerback does. But specifically Okudah, because he's still just trying to get games. And that's actually what Jeff Okudah talked about specifically, was kind of getting back into that mode of playing games versus just, running versus air and things like that. No, actually like battling against somebody, something that he didn't do for a while going through that recovery process. So shout out to Okudah, man, because he took that thing head on, that whole recovery process. It seemed like from day one, he took that thing head on. And he's just, as Brad Holmes put it perfectly, he accepted the challenge. So he feels pretty good about where the secondary is actually at now. And they also brought up the inside linebacker position, off-ball linebacker position. This was Ray Agnew who brought this position up. It's another spot that he's been maybe pleasantly surprised. It was another spot. And of course, the Lions, as we know right now, ended up having Josh Woods make it as their fifth off-ball linebacker on the roster. Malcolm Rodriguez has been big time. Malcolm Rodriguez to come on like he did. Now, they seem to pump the brakes a little bit more with Malcolm Rodriguez versus, say, Aiden Hutchinson.
I can't stop smiling. I love the kid. The kid's relentless, man. Effort, and much better athlete than you thought he was in the draft process, man. It's the things he can do, rushing the passer, inside, off the edge, using his hands. He's very creative as a rusher. I'll just say this, we got the right one.
Malcolm, they try to pump the brakes, seemed like a little bit more like, he is still the rookie though. But as Ray Agnew said, they decided to go, with the player over necessarily the intangibles. That may have been Brad Holmes that actually said that, which is a big reason that he ended up dropping in that draft, because he was productive, he was a playmaker, but intangibly, size, length, all those kind of things, he didn't really have it, but of course he did have some speed now, and so far he's been pretty darn good for the Lions. And of course Derek Barnes is a guy that they're expecting a lot of out of Derek Barnes heading into the season, and they have reliable Alex Anzalone. I guess in a way gave us sort of a little bit of draft insight, but it's kind of what we already knew in drafting certain positions where they draft them. And he specifically said off-ball linebacker, that's a place that you can wait a little bit longer. Now it's still tough to find guys, but you can definitely wait a little bit longer. And of course, as we see now, both of our two could be starting off-ball linebackers outside of Alex Anzalone were day 3 picks. Alex was a round 3 pick. And of course, as we always say with the Rams, round 3 pick and an undrafted free agent. One time they tried to hit on a round 1, it did not work with Brad Holmes. Talked about Jared Goff, and Brad Holmes said they felt like they basically gave more ownership to Jared Goff of this offseason. The plan was with Jared Goff was to kind of just show him that they believed in him, and they were going to try to give him more weapons for this upcoming season, and just give him a little bit more ownership of the team, which is actually a big credit to Ben Johnson and how he's kind of handled that situation and how comfortable Jared Goff has looked up to this point. It's even another part of the whole Tim Boyle, David Blau re-signing. With that, there was never like some sort of, pressure that could be put on from really anywhere that it was like, hey, this guy should probably be taking Goff's spot. I mean, it probably wouldn't have been a big problem because that's like, hey, the backup's playing pretty darn well, but they weren't putting that on him. They didn't put that pressure on him. Instead of using one of the higher picks on potentially a weapon for him, they could have flipped it the other way and just took a quarterback and said, hey, you know what? We don't believe in you, because if you do that, you're basically saying, you know what? We're moving on from you. It's just win. But instead, they took a different approach. They tried to give him more weapons, and by all the moves that they made, there's nothing else to think but they believe in him, and they kind of showed that more with action, with words, but also with action, because there was no action to believe otherwise that they didn't believe in him with by what they did this offseason.
I do believe the confidence that he has going into this year has been a big difference. And I've always felt that he was a confident kid. He's always been a very mentally tough kid. But, I think us giving him ownership and, letting him know, like, look, we believe in you. We're supporting you. We're going to put you in the best position to succeed. You're the quarterback. And so us surrounding him with a little bit better supporting cast and giving him that ownership, I think that's helped his confidence, and it showed in this camp.
Mark Bedell talking about Goff on there. You saw Dan Campbell saying, like, oh, dang, like, you're on fire today, basically. Big reason for that is just the consistency. But what I liked is the part where Jared Goff said, it's giving me more confidence. It's giving me confidence because, they're just going up there and making plays. And I think that's a huge part of it, for sure, is you're trusting that the guy's at least going to go knock the ball down, go make a play on the football. It's hard to give an opportunity to a guy that you don't necessarily not even just trust to make a play on the football, but just know where they're going to be. Like, hey, you go through it. Okay, they're going to be there. He didn't fall on the ground. He didn't run the wrong route. I know where he's going to be. I know what time he's going to be there. Pretty much accurately. And when there's that, then of course you have guys like Chark, who is making plays on the football that he's making. St. Brown already kind of proved that, he could be trustable last year. Josh Reynolds, same thing. He had trust immediately with that guy. He said, it's giving me confidence, because these guys are just going out there and making plays. And that's what we've seen from this receiver room, is that Goff is not, it's not that every pass is like, oh, he's throwing dots every single throw, but just look at the one to Quintez Cephas, another guy that Goff had trust with last year. And it was quick because it's not like he had to have this long history with these guys, but certain guys earned trust with him, and you saw that. Josh Brown's already had a trust factor. We saw that immediately. But Quintez Cephas earned the trust of Goff very early in the season. Of course, DJ Hockenson did, to the point where maybe a little bit too much, where other players not enough, because there were some passes that were arguably a little bit forced to him, but there were guys that earned the trust, and now you had more that have kind of just, like DJ Chark, who have earned the trust so far, seemingly through this offseason, asking him questions, even he said, rather than having to ask Ben Johnson because of the control that he's taken. But again, then that ties all the way back to the whole Jared Goff situation, because the ownership that they put on his plate, Jared Goff is taking that next step beyond just kind of being there. Like, he wants to know everything. This is that growth step, right? It's not about the, hey, his arm might get a little bit stronger. He might be a little bit faster. That's not going to be the step that Goff needs to take. The step that Goff needs to take is the ownership step, and it's the up here step. And that's how quarterback goes, right? The good quarterbacks get better with age, because the steps that they take are up here, not necessarily like in your arm or something like that. That's just not how it goes. Now, does that help? It can help, but that's not where the steps necessarily come from for quarterbacks to get better as they get older. And this is an opportunity for Goff to take that step with the Lions. This because Dan Campbell said something similar, but when speaking of kind of the Hard Knocks attention and all the things and all the stuff they're getting, we know Lions got the draft in 2024. But as Brad Holmes said, if we go out there and win 3 games, it's all for naught. What does that mean to free agents? Like, hey, Lions got a great culture here. Yeah, but they won 3 games. Like, how interested is a free agent going to be? And Brad Holmes probably knows about this extremely well, because he saw it firsthand with the LA Rams, what that meant to have a season turnaround, get into the playoffs. They didn't have to do tons of damage in the playoffs, but just to get into the playoffs, what that turnaround meant in 2017, the first year with Sean McVay, for specifically the guys like free agents, like he brought up, for guys like that are looking for, hey, maybe a deal, with a competitive team, something that's going to make me interested in this. You win 3 games, it's tough to get guys interested aside from money or location. However, you can definitely get guys interested when you're winning football games. Players, for the most part, a lot of players want to win. And on top of that, even players that necessarily haven't maybe proven a ton in the league, they would rather be on a good team, because the good teams get their players signed. It's seen in college all the time. A guy doesn't even really have to play much at the school, but if he goes to a big school, he's probably going to get an opportunity from someone. You go to Bama, someone's going to bring him in on a tryout.
The fans, this fan base is so passionate. They deserve to have hope and belief, but we got to hold up our end of the bargain. So we can have all this buzz and hype and all that, but we don't go out there and equate it to wins, then it really doesn't matter. So then next season, we're sitting down here right now at this time of the year, we'll be saying, oh, it's always buzz, but Lions just let us down. Like, no, that's not what we're trying to be. So we understand that, this thing's got to equate to win. That's what gets us excited, but, not just, competing, but just being smarter, but expecting to win. Now, you don't go into the game saying, oh, well, we're the underdog, and no, you go into the game saying, no, we're going to win this game. And I think that's the mindset that you got to have.
So again, like Dan Campbell, I love the honesty because again, this is a business. That's how you succeed in this business. You have to win football games. So the understanding of that, making that clear, not trying to just walk over it. They've made it clear that they understand that that's the situation, as we all do. That's the situation. And back to my free agent point, when you talk about building a culture and you're showing this kind of culture off, well, the wins that come along with that really reflect that the culture is changing, and it really shows that change is actually happening. On top of all that, I love that they bring up kind of the mindset change, right? Instead of always looking at it coming into the year that we're the underdogs and we're going to prove everybody wrong and that kind of thing, there also has to be the perspective of it that, we're the better team in this game. We are the better team. We are the better team in this game. We are one of the better teams in the league. We are a playoff team. That's our mindset. This is what we are. So we're going to go into every game expecting to win. And you think about that exercise that he did on Hard Knocks when going to players from Notre Dame or whatever school it was that wins a majority of their games, saying, hey, you expected to win every single game. You lost one game in your college season. You expected every game that you were going to win that. That needs to be our mindset. Wasn't going to put a number on, what necessarily they're expecting to do this year, which I completely get. You can't really put a number on it. There's too much variables that go into one game specifically, one play. How can he predict that one play this is going to happen, or this one time we get the wrong call or the right call? How can he necessarily predict that that's how this is going to go? How can he predict that Justin Tucker is going to break the NFL record? Yes, I do want to throw in the little point that Brad Holmes did bring up, that these young guys, they need to be smarter heading into year 2 specifically. So these players that were in that moment, think, I don't know, Bobby Price, for example, even though he's not year 2, but just a player like that was in that moment, whatever it may have been, end of game, third down, you have that experience, so we can't have the same breakdowns. That's where we need to get smarter, because now you've had the on-field. That's not an excuse. You've been out there. For those guys that have been out there, which is why last year, in a way, could be looked at as a blessing in disguise if it goes the way we hope. Speaking of young guys, how about Jameson Williams? We saw the video of Jameson Williams running, which was great to see. I would have assumed he's already been running, but I don't know. I didn't see a caption to it or anything. It sounds like he's already been running. It looked like he was working on some stop and start here. We know, as the Lions said, of course he's healed because he's running, but he's trying to build up that strength to protect himself, to be able to play in a game situation, not think about it. So he's trying to build up the strength. Clearly he can run. It's healed in the terms of that he can run, right? The injury, the ACL tear, is healed, but now he's building up the strength, and you could see it here. I mean, he didn't look like 100% in this video, but it was nice to see him kind of work on the stop and start. I still was a little bit like watching it, like, ooh, okay, be careful, J-Mo. Be careful, J-Mo. Right? And as Brad Holmes said when we drafted him, we understood, that this guy isn't just, what is he for me right now? He's also, he's a long-term piece of this team. He's a long-term, big time down the road weapon for this offense that can really dictate a lot of things defensively. So this isn't just a short-term, addition. And kind of the same thing with Josh Paschal. He said they really necessarily weren't surprised with the injury, is kind of the way that Brad Holmes put it, that he's dealing with right now. And he said we do have kind of a timetable for what we expect from Josh Paschal. They get crazy medical reports when they come out. And of course, we know he had the sports hernia surgery. So he said that necessarily weren't surprised, and they have a timetable for him. But of course, he didn't give us what that is. So I don't know when to expect Paschal, but we do know that he's out for at least the first 4 weeks. This year is different, and how he said with the 53-man roster, last year maybe there was 1 or 2 discussions they had. This year was a lot different. But even back to, again, that winning 3 games thing, as he said, and I love how he put it, he said we need to hold up our end of the bargain. I was actually watching some of the old games like 2011, and the amount of false starts the Lions were forcing on people was, season high. The Lions were forcing more false starts on teams than any other team in the league, and of course that year they got out to a 5-0 start. So we know it can get loud. That field or that stadium, Ford Field, is built the way that it's built. It can get loud. It's very tight. It can get very loud in there. If you had that thing packed out and people were loud the entire time, that thing would be, that'd be deafening. And there's actually proof that it has been. It has been effective, that it has been effective in the past. So that's not just something. That's not a projection. We've seen it. Anyways, a couple of final little notes I want to throw in here from Hard Knocks last week, because this episode 5 is going to be tough. It looks like they're going to show a lot of the cuts. They were kind of like working their way towards it. They spotlighted guys like Khalil Pimpleton, who is actually now with the Giants practice squad, so they may actually throw that in there, which makes sense, because if you remember, they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. They were kind of looking for a piece like that. So they have Pimpleton on their practice squad, but they were showcasing players like that. Obina Eze, now he's back on our practice squad, so I'm sure they'll bring that up, but they may end up showing some of those cuts, which is going to be tough. However, I'm hoping we get to see a little bit of Eminem in there, because they put that little clip out there, which basically kind of tells me that it's going to be in there. Maybe that's the only clip they put in there of it, but can we get this guy at like a game or something, like to perform? I mean, just a little bit. I know they put up the thing on the screen, but just a little bit. I mean, we're setting the table so that the 2024 draft, I mean, he will come here. But, you know, we could – he did say he feels like we got a good team this year. So – and he said he would be great for them if they needed him. He could go in there and basically play any position. Spot open on the practice squad. If you think that's just open to be open, you might be wrong. You know what I'm saying? They could be doing contract negotiations right now as we speak. That would make sense. I mean, it really would line up. The whole quarterback thing, I thought it was really interesting. It seems like they didn't necessarily plan to put David Blau in that game, which was kind of like, hey, Tim Boyle, this is your job to lose, but he still had to play well and earn it. And clearly that was not that way. He's like, let's give David Blau a shot, and we know how that all ended up happening. Like how they show, you know, the no coaches practice. Dan was out there with the whistle, but he didn't really say anything, and how that went. That was pretty cool. And then probably the best part was a little quote that he gave us. He's like, hey, I think we got a defense this year, which, if you watch that Steelers game, that first team defense was nasty. We were on fire in that game. Now, that's not the most prolific offense or the best offensive line, but it's not the worst either. And the Lions were not just playing like average with them, where it was like a couple good drives, couple bad. No, they were shutting them down. Like, they were playing outstanding defensively. The small amount of yards that they allowed of his first team defense was incredible. With that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We will be back this week with predictions and all of those type of things, so we get ready for the 2022 season opener against the Philadelphia Eagles. I do plan to actually do a fantasy league. That's the plan. I know some of you guys have asked me about that, so stay tuned. Check the community tab. If that does happen, that will be out there soon to let you guys know when that's going to take place. I know we've kind of waited a little bit, but I mean, really, what's the rush? You know, do we really need to see our team weeks out for what? You know, just so what? There's a chance they get hurt. Like, nah, man, there's no rush. So, you know, I don't know. The deadline, well, Thursday's a game, so we kind of got to get to it. But anyways, if that happens, which it should, we may just do a weekly thing. We'll figure it out. Either way, check the community tab, because if it's weekly, then, you know, that'll be a little bit different. But that'll still be through the community tab. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.